Alright, so good morning everyone, and thank you for tuning in to MFM Radio and TV this beautiful Wednesday morning. Yes, today is the 7th day in the month of August, year 2022. Good afternoon, good morning Africa, good morning Nigerians, and good morning to you all listening to MFM Radio and TV this morning. Alright, so before we get into the news, I want to give us a very quick tip this morning. Always learn to celebrate your wins, your victory, and your achievement. No matter how small or how big it is, always find time to celebrate your little wins and your achievement. Alright, so with that, you're welcome back to another exciting and engaging edition of From the Newspaper, streaming live from MFM Radio and TV, right here in the ancient city of Ibadan, right in the beautiful city of Ibadan. In case you're listening or watching us for the very first time, this is the ultimate newspaper review show right here at MFM Radio and TV, where we get to bring to you the latest headlines, trending stories, and also relevant informations as we have them on the front pages of our national dailies. And of course, MFM Radio and TV is the station where we get to set the agenda, and everything that we say here, everything that we project in this station is nothing but the truth. Alright, so from the newspapers, like I said, is that newspaper review show that is in 3 segments. The very first segment of the program this morning is the weather forecast report for the 3 major cities in Nigeria: the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, the commercial city of Lagos State, and the vibrant city of Ibadan, where we are transmitting live from this morning. And the second segment of the program is the headlines making rounds on the front pages of our national dailies, and we are talking about the Punch newspaper, the Guardian newspaper, the Nation, the Tribune, and of course the Vanguard newspaper. These are the 5 newspapers we'll be taking a look at the headlines this morning. And the last segment to the program this morning is the details to the stories. Alright, so my name is MOBOLAJI KAREEM, and I'm not doing this alone. I have my partner in the studio this morning.
Good morning to you all. I'm Corinne.
Alright, so you can join us on Facebook at MFM TV. You can be a part of the conversation this morning. Just go right there to the platform. Do all to like, leave a comment, and also share this program. I know, like I always say every morning, like I always say every day, this program is highly interactive. If you have anything whatsoever to say on the stories that we'll be taking a look at this morning, you can call us at 0815-9194-247 or drop your comment on our Facebook page at MFM TV to be a part of the show this morning. Alright, so like I said, the very first segment of the program this morning is the weather forecast report for the 3 major cities in Nigeria, and we always do this every morning. We always give you the weather forecast report for these 3 cities every morning, so it's going to help you to plan your daily activities and also prepare you for any type of weather condition ahead of the day. Alright, so this morning, starting with the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. From exactly 10 a.m. in Abuja, the weather is very cloudy and the weather temperature is 21 degrees Celsius. 11 a.m. 12 p.m. we have rain and the weather temperature is 23 degrees. 1 p.m. 2 p.m. the weather is still very cloudy with 24 degrees Celsius. 3 p.m. 4 p.m. 5 p.m. the weather is still very much cloudy in Abuja and the weather temperature is 24 degrees Celsius. 6 p.m. 7 p.m. we have thunderstorms and the weather temperature is 23 degrees. 8 p.m. still thunderstorms in Abuja and the weather temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. 9 p.m. 10 p.m. up until 11 p.m. in Abuja for today, we have a very cloudy weather condition and thunderstorms, and the weather temperature is 21 degrees Celsius.
Right here in the beautiful city of Ibadan, where we are streaming live from, by exact 10 a.m. the weather is 25 degrees Celsius, mostly cloudy. By 11 a.m. the weather is cloudy and the weather temperature is 26 degrees Celsius. By 12 p.m. the weather is 27 degrees Celsius and cloudy. By 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. the weather is 28 degrees Celsius and it's cloudy. By 5 p.m. the weather is 28 degrees Celsius and it's cloudy. By 6 p.m. the weather is 26. By 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. the weather is 26 degrees Celsius, still cloudy. By 8 p.m. the weather is 25 degrees Celsius and it's cloudy. By 9 p.m., 10 p.m. the weather is 23 degrees Celsius and it's cloudy with wind. By 11 p.m. the weather is 23 degrees Celsius and it's cloudy.
Alright, so finally, from Lagos State, the commercial city of Lagos, from exactly 10 a.m. we have intermittent clouds and the weather temperature is 27 degree. 11 a.m. 12 p.m. the weather is now very cloudy with 28 degrees Celsius. 1 p.m. 2 p.m. the weather is still mostly cloudy with 28 degree. 3 p.m. 4 p.m. 5 p.m. the weather is still very much cloudy with 27 degrees Celsius. 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. up until 11 p.m. in Lagos for today, the weather is still very much cloudy with 26 degrees Celsius. Alright, so the weather condition in Lagos today shows that the chances that it will rain in Lagos State is very, very high. Alright, so in Lagos, Abuja, and Ibadan, the weather is very cloudy and the chances that it will rain in these three cities today is quite high. So it's quite advisable for you to leave your house with an umbrella this morning because the chances that it will rain in Lagos, Abuja, and Ibadan is very, very high. So that's that about the first segment of the program this morning, which is the weather forecast report. Now moving straight to the second segment of the program this morning, which is the headlines making rounds on the front pages of our Nigerian dailies. And like I said, we'll be taking a look at the Punch newspaper, the Guardian newspaper, the Nigerian Tribune, the Nation newspaper, and the Vanguard newspaper. These are the five newspapers we'll be taking a look at the headlines this morning. And of course, we have quite a lot of stories on our national dailies for this morning edition, the Wednesday edition. Alright, so like always, I'll be starting with the Punch newspaper for this morning. The lead story on the Punch newspaper for today says Russian flag. 4G government proves for northern political bigwigs, and page 2 has the details to that story. And the writer to the story says influential political figures from Katsina, Kaduna, Bauchi suspected of sponsoring protests. And the second writer to the story this morning says, Federal government deploy operative in Niger, Chad borders, protest ROS disown Russian flag wavers, and page 2 has analysis to this story. Alright, so above the Punch newspaper for this morning on page 30, 1 trillion naira spent to fight insecurity in 6 months, and this is coming from a report, and page 30 has a detail. On page 14 of the Punch newspaper for today, reps failed to effect 50% pay cut, and page 14 has the details to that story. Still on page 14 of the Punch newspaper for this morning, varsities mobilizing unqualified graduates for NYSC, and this is coming from JAMB, and page 14 has the details to that story. CBN OK's Unity Providers measure, SEC review next, and page 29 has the analysis to that story. Alright, so now below the Punch newspaper, and of course still on page 30, the next story there says Naira crude sale yet to happen, says operators, and page 30 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
4 suspected cultists now for killing Ogun State Baba, and pages 4 and 5 has the details to that story. Alright, so finally the last headline this morning on the Punch newspaper is still on page 30, and the story says import duty waiver on rice orders begins next week, and this is coming from the federal government, and page 30 has the details to that story.
The lead headline in the Nation newspaper is on page 2. Cost of living protests fizzle out in more states, Abuja. This has 2 riders, and the first one says, Katsina Kano relax fuel curfew by 12 hours. Mobile courts remands 632 rioters. On page 4, Edu 4.3 million Nigerians gets direct cash transfer, and the writer to that story says, 1 million benefit monthly. Federal government inaugurates steering committee for digital free zone. The story has a rider and it says, boost for global tech, finance, services, based business. The details to that story is on page 6 in Nation newspaper. CBN OK's merger of units, Providence Bank. The analysis to that story is on page 7. The student top list of 4.68 million voters in Edo, Ondo polls. The details to that story is on page 5. The last headlines on the Nation newspaper for this morning is on page 7. 1.4 million jobs on offer from cotton textile sector. The story has a rider. Revamping process begins. Heirs Insurance Group appoints Pru Aroch executive directors. Still on page 7 in Nation newspaper for this morning.
Alright, so taking the next set of the headlines this morning from the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. And the lead story says, sponsors of protest on watch list, says federal government, and page 4 has a detail. Alright, so quite a lot of brother to that story. And the very first one says, we have blocked external funding for protest, says IGP. We are after only enemies of the state, says CDS. Suspension of duties, taxes on imported pharmaceutical food will reduce prices, says CG Customs. And page 4 has the details to that story. Alright, so above the Tribune newspaper for this morning, on page 7, Nigerians' reliance on crude oil is a deadly mistake, says Obasanjo, and page 7 has analysis to that story. Still on page 7 of the Tribune newspaper for today, Health Insurance Group appoints Ibrahim Puri, Sonny Iroche as independent non-executive directors, and page 7 has the details to that story. CBN approved financial support for Unity Providence Bank's merger, and page 6 has the details to that story. On page 13 of the Tribune newspaper for this morning, Ondo will implement 70,000 naira minimum wage, says Aida Tiwa, and page 13 has the detail. New FMCs in Ekpe miss how we have nursing schools, says federal government, and page 30 has the analysis to that story. Another story on the Tribune newspaper for this morning is on page 20, and the story says Ogun State to conduct local government election November 16, and page 20 has the details to that story. Alright, so now below the Tribune newspaper for this morning on page 11, now Southeast Caucus petitions IGP over Igbo Must Go campaign, and page 11 has the analysis to that story. Ndume may return as Chief Whip meet APC NWC, and page 30 has the analysis to that story.
Audio Jump.
Tinubu appoints new CEO for National Social Investment Program Agency, and page 4 has the detail. Right, so finally the last headline this morning, still on page 4 of the Tribune newspaper, says violent protests in North an attempt to create atmosphere for overthrow of government, says Shehu Sani, and the writer to the story says morning Russian flag shared to youth, and page 4 has the analysis to that story.
The lead headline is on page 6 in the Guardian newspaper for this morning. Citizens wallow in misery as government saved duties to federal government amid 5.34 trillion cuts. Falana backs military on denouncing protesters' use of Russian flags. The details is on page 6. Eid Tinubu dialogue call. ECOWAS tells protesters. The details to that story is on page 3. Page 30 has two headlines, and the first one is after apology, APC to reinstate Ndume as chief whip. Still on page 30 in the Guardian newspaper, federal government inaugurates steering committees for digital free zones to boost global tech. On page 4 in the Guardian newspaper, how loopholes in public procurement act nourish graft. On page 15, Nigeria orders developing country stock in middle income, trap says World Bank. Still on page 15 in the Guardian newspaper, CBN says Unity Bank clears mergers with providers. The last headlines on the front page of the Guardian newspaper for this morning is on page 12. OPAG NNPCL and subsidies, crude oil for refineries.
Alright, so finally, the last headline this morning is the Vanguard newspaper. And the lead news on page 5 says 6 pioneers view sponsors of rioters arrested, says police, and page 5 has the details to that story. Alright, so quite a lot of writer to that, and the very first one is 76 other protests arrested in Kano. Police trace sponsors. Some sponsors in diaspora on watch list, says Immigration CG. We're only a year after those who don't mean well for the country, says CDS. Protesters in Rivers block East-West Road. Others march to Wiki's private residence. CAM returns to Kaduna as soldiers security operative enforce 24-hour curfew. Government still relaxes curfew to 12 hours daily in Kano State. And the last writer to the story says protest in Abuja loses momentum as government restriction takes toll on demonstrators. And page 5 has the details to that story. Alright, so above the Vanguard newspaper for this morning on page 8, UK riot, police wary of 30 gatherings tag big day of disorder, and page 8 has the analysis to that story. The next story this morning on the Vanguard newspaper is on page 20, and the story says CBN approved merger of Unity and Providence banks, and page 20 has the analysis to that story. On page 7, we are ready to pay 70,000 naira minimum wage, says Nasarawa and Ondo state governors, and page 7 has the details to that story. As Insurance Group appoints Ibrahim Puri, Iroche non-executive directors. Coronation Merchant Bank names Paul Abiagam, acting managing director and CEO, and page 20 has the details to that story. Another story on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper for this morning says, Party government revive moribund cotton, textile industries target 1.4 million jobs, and page 8 has the details to that story. The next story this morning on the Vanguard newspaper is on sport, and the story says, incredible, three Nigerian women qualify for Olympic long jump final, and page 31 has the details to that story. On page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper for this morning, protests, police nab 82 more suspects in Jigawa State, and page 9 has the details to that story. Still on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper for this morning, local government polls, Soludo swears in members of Electoral Commission, and page 9 has the detail. On page 4, INEC releases final voter register for Edo and Ondo governorship polls, and page 4 has the detail. The next story this morning, still on sports, says Paris Olympics, Toby Amoshon into women's 100-meter hurdle semi-final, and page 3 has the details to that story. Alright, so still on sports, Real Madrid edges Chelsea while AC Milan wins on penalties, and page 5 has the details to that story. Alright, so finally the last headline this morning on the Vanguard newspaper is on page 9, and the story says Tinubu appoints former Katsina Governor Aminu Masari as State Fund Board Chairman, and page 9 has the details to that story.
Audio Jungle.
Alright, so that's that about the second segment of the program this morning, which is the headlines making rounds on the front pages of our national dailies for this morning. And of course, like I always say, you may want to stay updated with any of this interesting news story. Just go right there to any of this newspaper, be it the Punch newspaper, Vanguard newspaper, to further read on the story for this morning. Alright, so with that, we'd like to go on a very short commercial break, and of course, when we get to come back, we get to take the details of the headline for this morning. So stay tuned, it is still from the newspapers. We'll be right back.
Audio Jungle.
To the #1 radio station, KAREEM FM, the station that is projecting the truth.
MFM TV ìrẹ́rìn lónìgbò ìrẹ́fà lọ́lọ́dún gbogbo tí tó ń gbọ́ mi ní tìletò gidi gan ni ẹ bá wọn dòwò pọ̀ kẹ́ ẹ lè jàǹfààní wọn ni èmi èjì yóò kí ló ń kéde léyìí sí gbogbo etí ọmọ aráyé pátápátá ẹ jẹ́ bá AM/FM dòwò pọ̀ ká lè sórí ire nítorí ní tá a bá fẹ́ l'Ẹlẹ́dùmarè máa fẹ́.
AM/FM rédíò and tẹlifíṣàn ìkànnì tó jáléjáko ni gbogbo ẹ máa gbọ́ ìròyìn tó kù ìdánilẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ìgbà gbogbo ìránnilétí àṣà àdáyébá ní AM/FM ló wà ẹ̀jẹ̀ a máa gbọ́. orúkọ tèmi ní olóyè adírẹ̀mí adídèjì ọlọ́fàáná mọ́ǹtì ọbàjẹ́ ti ìlú Ẹdẹ.
ọ̀tọ̀ ni gbogbo ọ̀yà ni ó mọ̀ pera rẹ̀ lódù bó bá jẹ́ níbi tí kábánira mọ́tò láti òkè òkun tàbí ó fẹ́ ra ojúlówó mọ́tò ilé tí ó já lálòpẹ́ iléeṣẹ́ mọ́tò Onabis Automobile òní òye àkànṣí eléyìí tó kalẹ̀ sí kìlómítà 8 Old Ife Road àdójúkọ ilé ìtajà àgbàlódé Brent sọ́ọ̀mì nílẹ̀ Ìbàdàn bóyá ẹ̀yin fẹ́ ra mọ́tò tàbí ẹ fẹ́ gbé mọ́tò ránṣẹ́ láti ilẹ̀ òkèrè sórílẹ̀-èdè wa Nàìjíríà kódà orí ọ̀fẹ́ wà láti bá yín ṣe àmójútó láti bá yín ṣe àyẹ̀wò sí mọ́tò yín iléeṣẹ́ Onabis Automobile òun gẹ́gẹ́ ni mò ń pè níyàn ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ wọn ni 0803 371 0636 0803 371 0636 Onabis Automobile boom 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 boom.
AM/FM fún ìdálárayá ètò àsìkò ìkọ́nilẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ìgbà gbogbo AM/FM ní kẹ́ ẹ máa gbọ́ ẹ má gbé kúrò níbẹ̀ nígbà gbogbo ẹni tó bá níjó tí ò jó ẹni tó bá ráyọ̀ tí ò yọ̀ ọjọ́ tí ò pẹ́ ní sunra rẹ̀ láwọ̀ ara AM/FM ló ní kẹ́ ẹ níjó kẹ́ ẹ jó kẹ́ ẹ ráyọ̀ kẹ́ ẹ sì máa yọ̀.
You are listening to the #1 radio station, KAREEM FM, the station that is projecting the truth.
Alright, so it's very great to have you back too from the newspapers, from live from MFM Radio and TV, right in the beautiful city of Ibadan. And of course, we're taking you through the headlines from the national dailies for this morning. Now we're moving straight into the details of the headlines, but you know we have to inform you again that we're live on Facebook at MFM TV. You can be a part of the conversation this morning. Just go right there to the platform, do all to like, leave a comment, and also share this program. And of course, like I always say, this program is highly interactive. It has to do with things that concerns you and I as a citizen of this great nation. So if you have anything to say on the stories that we'll be taking a look at, just call us at 0815 9194 0815 9194 to be a part of the conversation this morning. Alright, so the very first story I have here with me this morning is from the Punch newspaper. And the story says, Russian flag, federal government probes for northern political bigwigs, and here's the detail. Nigerian security agencies are investigating at least 4 politicians from the country's northern part over the use of the Russian flag by the NBAS governance protesters. Multiple sources told the newsmen that the political bigwigs who hail from Katsina, Kaduna, and Kano State were principal actors who instigated the use of Russian flags among demonstrators in the north to fan the embers for an unconstitutional regime change. The nationwide protest against hardship and hunger took a dangerous dimension on Monday, with protesters in some northern states waving the Russian flags as they chanted, "Tinubu must go." The Nigerian military on Monday said persons flying the Russian flag were committing treason and would therefore be prosecuted. It also said it is investigating those who are instigating the move and will take serious actions against them. However, protesters with the flag reduced drastically on Tuesday after the state security personnel clamped down on them in several states, arresting them and also their perceived foreign sponsors. Also, the lead news on the Punch newspaper for this morning edition says Russian flag for government pros for northern political bigwigs, and the details of the stories on the Punch newspaper for this morning.
The first story from the Guardian newspaper, and the headline says, Tinubu appoints new heads for agencies under Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved the appointment of 7 persons to head strategic agencies and programs under the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. The appointment of the facility is to facilitate the needed relief to Nigerians and ensure effective of humanitarian and social development program. Accordingly, Dr. Badamasi Lawal is appointed Chief Executive Officer, National Social Investments Program Agency, NSIPA. Dr. Lawal holds a doctorate degree in education, and he previously served as a commissioner in Katsina State.
Audio Jungle.
Alright, so still reading from the Punch newspaper for this morning. The next story says Yaya Bello denies link with anti-Tinubu protest, and here's the detail.
Audio Jungle.
The media office of the immediate past governor of Kogi State, Alhaji Yaya Bello, has refuted the claims in certain quarters that he is one of the sponsors of the ongoing end-bans government protests across the country. A statement issued on Wednesday and signed by Michael Oyari stated the claim was part of the grand plans by some of the enemies of the former governor to frame him. The statement made available to newsmen in Lokoja described the claim as reckless and malicious, adding that the former governor remained a patriot who had devoted his time, resources and also energy to building a united and prosperous Nigeria. The ex-governor's whereabouts has remained unknown since the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission declared him wanted over an alleged 80.2 billion naira fraud. Alright, so you can further read on this story from the Punch newspaper for this morning, and the story says Yaya Bello denies link with anti-Tinubu protest.
Still reading from the Guardian newspaper. Nigeria's cotton industry revitalization to create 1.4 million jobs annually. The federal government, in collaboration with the International Cotton Advisory Committee (ICAC), has kickstarted a resuscitation of Nigeria's cotton industry. The target is to create over 1.4 million jobs annually to the cotton textile sector, while the focus is to develop key components of the cotton value chain comprising farming, weaving, ginning and linking of cotton, all in line with the industrialization drive of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. This was the outcome of a meeting held on Tuesday between Vice President KAREEM and the delegation from the ICAC led by its Executive Director, Mr. Eric Trechtenberg, and the Presidential Villa, Abuja.
Alright, so the next story this morning, still from the Punch newspaper, says INEC releases Edo-Ondo final voter registers, and here's the detail. The Independent National Electoral Commission has released the final voter register for the upcoming Edo and Ondo governorship elections. The decision followed a meeting held by the Commission on Tuesday, as contained in a statement signed by the National Commissioner and Chairman of the Information and Voter Education Committee, Sam Olumekun. The Edo State governorship election is scheduled for September 21, 2024, while the exercise will be held in Ondo State on November 16, 2024. The new register incorporates new voters from the recent continuous voter registration and includes successful applicants for transfer from the state to Edo and Ondo State. Olumeko noted that INEC had uploaded a detailed breakdown of the voter register by local government areas, gender, age, occupation, and disability to its website and social media platform for public access. He further stated that the Commission would release the timetable for the collection of the permanent voter card for all categories of voters in both states, including new registrants, those who apply for transfer replacement, and also uncollected cards from the previous registrations. Alright, so the story still continues, and you can further get the details of this story from the Punch newspaper for this morning. And the story says INEC releases Edo Ondo final voter registers.
I'm still reading from the Guardian newspaper, and the headline says, Day 6 #End Bad Governance protesters targets Wikes residents in Rivers. Day 6 of the #End Bad Governance protest gets tougher in Rivers State as protesters stormed a residence of the Minister of Federal Capital Territory in Nyesom Wike, also Adegeorge Road, Port Harcourt. They had some access road and forced traders to close shop. The protesters also took the demonstration to several rural communities across the 23 local government areas of the state. The protesters also forced motorists and traders to lift up green leaves in solidarity with the protest, vowed to occupy the streets until 10th day until their demands are addressed. They lamented that they were further grieved by the broadcast of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on this ongoing protest. They said the president failed to address the demand of the #End Bad Governance protesters but rather threatened Nigerians.
Alright, so still reading from the Punch newspaper. Suspend capital projects, address hunger, Mark Ban tells federal government. And here's the detail. The Miyati Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria on Tuesday called on the federal government to suspend spending on capital projects such as road constructions and channel available resources towards subsidizing food, medicine, and also essential needs in the country. Marx Ban National President Alhaji Baba Ingel Zema made the call in an interview with the news agency of Nigeria in Abuja amid the tension in the country occasioned by the nationwide hunger protests which began on August 1. Nigerians have been facing difficult times over skyrocketing food prices following the removal of fuel subsidies and the floating of naira by the federal government. The hunger protesters are calling on President Bola Tinubu to reverse two policies in order to ease citizens' burden. Weighing in on Tuesday, the Marx Ban president said the government should increase spending on foodstuff. On insecurity, he urged the government to also foster dialogue to resolve the conflict between the herders and farmers in the country. Alright, so the story says suspend capital project, address hunger, and Mark Brown tells federal government, and the story is on the Punch newspaper for this morning.
Still reading from the Guardian newspaper. Federal government inaugurates steering committee for digital free zones to boost global tech. For global tech trade, trade and innovation, the federal government of launched an initiative to establish digital free zone in the country. Chaired by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a steering committee has been inaugurated to oversee the establishment of this digital free zone. Digital free zones are designed to attract and support tech, finance, and service-oriented business in conducive environment, tailored in the 21st century digital trade and technological age. The details are contained in a statement in Abuja by the Director, Information and Public Relations, Federal Ministry of Finance, Mohammed Maga. Members of the committee include the Ministers of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, as the Vice Chairman, Justice Prince Lateef Osun Olasunkami Fagbemi San, Ministers of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, Dr. Bosun Tijani, Industry, Trade and Investments, Dr. Doris Uzoka Anite, Interior, Mr. Olubumi Tunji Ojo, and heads of relevant government agencies.
Alright, so the next story this morning from the Punch newspaper says Indume meets APC NWC, apologizes for anti-president's comment, and here's the detail. The senator representing Borno South Senatorial District of Borno State, Ali Indume, on Tuesday expressed regret over his open criticism of the ruling All Progressive Congress and President Bola Tinubu. Indume expressed his regret while speaking to journalists in Abuja shortly after a closed-door meeting with the APC National Working Committee. Indume, an APC chieftain, had been relieved of his role as the chief whip of the Senate on account of his open criticism of his party and the president. The Senate sacked him after receiving a letter to the same effect from the APC National Chairman Abdullahi Ganduje and the National Secretary Ajibola Bashiru. Also speaking, the APC National Chairman Abdullahi Ganduje said Indume had apologized and had been forgiven. Alright, so the story still continues, and can further read on this story from the Punch newspaper for this morning. And the story says Indume meets APC NWC, apologizes for anti-president's comment.
Audio Jungle.
Still reading from the Guardian newspaper. Momo out of touch with fact about food program. The special advisor to the Edo State Governor on media cruise, Osagi, was berated the ministers of Niger Delta Affairs, Abubakar Momo, for attempting to mislead the public on the state government feeding program, noting that claims by the ministers that the bag of rice allocated to the state by the federal government were rebagged and distributed by the state government is completely false and malicious. In a state, Osagi said that the state government had in March 2024 designed a feeding program that was implemented through religion institution in the state, with over 2.2 billion naira released to Christian and Muslim bodies in the implement the program, which has been very successful. He said the case of looting bags of rice referenced by the ministers has been put to rest by the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, which has explained that it is an incident at the residence of one of its vendors. Unfortunately, the All Progressive Congress, APC, whose propaganda the minister appears to echo in his interview on national television, seems to have an axe in grind with the Christian umbrella body.
Alright, so the next story this morning from the Tribune newspaper says Tinubu's broadcast was in hunger protest, says Bauchi governor, and here's the detail. The Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed has tagged President Bola Tinubu's Sunday nationwide broadcast as an empty statement, claiming it wasn't the hunger protest. But the ruling All Progressive Congress rubbished the claim by Mohammed, who is the chairman of the People's Democratic Party Governors Forum. Mohammed made this known shortly after an emergency security meeting at the Bauchi State Government House on Monday night. The president, in a broadcast on Sunday, appealed to the youth and the citizens to end the hunger protest, which began on August 1, explaining that his decision to remove the fuel subsidy and float the naira way to save the nation's economy from total collapse. However, the Bauchi State Governor said the president should have listened to the state governors before the broadcast. Alright, so the story from the Tribune newspaper says Tinubu's broadcast was in hunger protest, says Bauchi governor, and you can further read on this story from the Tribune newspaper for this morning.
Drug war NDLEA operatives undergo diving training. Operatives of National Drug Law Enforcement Agency NDLEA have undergone basic diving training to complete the war against drug trafficking and shipment into Nigeria. The Guardian learned the 8 officers were selected from 4 countries. They included 2 personnel from the Marine Command of NDLEA picked by the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime to undergo training in Bimbias, Brazil. The training came from 2 phases, first in November 2023 and then in July 2024, according to the UNODC. And diving course was initiated to strengthen the fight against drug trafficking and strengthening the fight against drug trafficking. The second phase was to qualify professionals certified in basic and advanced diving in public safety diving to conduct ship or searches, enforce the law and ensure public safety in combating transnational drug trafficking.
Alright, so the next story this morning from the Punch newspaper says varsities mobilizing unqualified graduates for NYSC JAMB alleges, and here's the details to the story.
Audio Jungle.
The Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board has accused some tertiary institutions of aiding candidates with irregular or illegal admissions to falsify records towards mobilization for the National Youth Service Corps. JAMB made the allegation in a letter addressed to the Vice Chancellors, Provosts and Registrars of tertiary institutions in the country. In the letter signed by its Director of Admissions, MOBOLAJI, JAMB said it noticed that institutions continue to admit candidates outside the Central Admission Processing Unit. It also recorded that 88 institutions were named as perpetrators of illegal admissions across the country. On Sunday, JAMB gave all institutions with illegal admissions outside CAPS an ultimatum to make the disclosure. Alright, so the story still continues, and the story says varsities mobilizing unqualified graduates for NYSC JAMB alleges, and the story is on the Punch newspaper for this morning.
Still from the Guardian newspaper, police warns as protest turns violent in Rivers. The Rivers State Police Command has expressed concern over the escalating #EndBadGovernance protest in the state. The command said it observed a disturbing trend despite initial assurance of peaceful demonstration within designated areas. According to the police, the protest has become increasingly disorganized with no clear leadership or coordination among the participants group. The police spokesman SP Grace Irene Koko said the breakdown had deteriorated orders, prompting the command to issue a warning. Irene Koko said the police had initially offered to provide protection and isolate criminal elements, but the lack of leadership has hindered efforts to maintain peace. She warned that the police will take decision action against protesters who engage in violence and criminal conduct. She said the police observed that protesters were resorting to unlawful acts, including burning tires, extorting of motorists, blocking roads, damaging vehicles, harassing business owners, and stealing from innocent residents.
Alright, so let me tell you some more story before we go on another short commercial break. And the story from the Tribune newspaper says Labour warns against tax hike in Ondo State as Ondo okay 70,000 naira minimum wage, and here's the detail. The Ondo State government on Tuesday expressed its readiness to pay the 70,000 naira minimum wage to civil servant. The state head of service, Mr. Bayo Phillips, stated this while speaking in his office in Akure, the state's capital. However, the chairman of the Trade Union Congress in Ondo, Clement Fatuwashi, welcomed the state's commitment to the payment of the new minimum wage but urged against the imposition of heavy taxes. The new minimum wage was signed into law by President Bola Tinubu after long deliberation between organized labor, the government, as well as the private sector. The Ondo HOS said Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa has repeatedly given the assurance that his government would not do anything less than whatever was approved by the federal government as the new national minimum wage for the workers. He also noted that the government was also extended the gesture to retirees and also workers in all state-owned tertiary institutions as a way of ameliorating the current economic situation in the country. Alright, so the story from the Tribune newspaper says Labour warns against tax hike as Ondo okay 70,000 naira minimum wage, and the story is on the Tribune newspaper for this morning. Alright, so with that, we'd like to go on a very short break, and of course when we come back we'll get to take the last set of the details for this morning, so stay tuned, we'll be right back.
You are listening to the #1 radio station, KAREEM FM, the station that is projecting the truth.
MFM TV ẹ máa gbọ́ déédéé torí pé ìbá pàrọ̀ wakọ̀ tọ́pọ̀ ṣẹ̀ṣà borí tọ́pọ̀ alẹ́ sọdẹ ní tí ó tẹ̀lé èdè láyé o orúkọ tèmi ni orí adéwọ̀ ní ti.
oníkẹ́kọ̀ọ́ gbọ́dọ̀ mọ́ mi àtọkùnrin wa àtọkùnrin wa ẹ̀lẹ́ o gbogbo ẹ̀yìn ọkùnrin wa pẹ̀lẹ́ o gbogbo ẹ̀yìn obìnrin wa pẹ̀lẹ́ o FMTV oníkẹ́kọ̀ọ́ gbọ́dọ̀ ẹ̀yìn ọkùnrin wa pẹ̀lẹ́ o FMTV oníkẹ́kọ̀ọ́ gbọ́dọ̀ lórí Instagram lórí Facebook ìdíkẹ́ wọ́n gbọ́ òjẹ̀mọ́ mi ẹ̀wà lórí ìṣẹ́nu ọ̀bánàmá ẹ̀wà lórí ẹ̀sìsì láwùn ìdòdò gbogbo ìkànnà gbé wálẹ̀ gbogbo eré ládùnládùn gbogbo tó lóyún tó bá ronú tó bá ronú tì MFM oníkanmọ́ gbọ́ olólùfẹ́ mi ẹ̀yọ́ rẹ̀ wá ọkọ sọ fúnyàwó rẹ̀ MFM oníkẹ́mọ́ gbọ́ ẹnìkẹ́mọ́ gbọ́ ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́ ni MFM.
gbogbo náà gbogbo bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ ní gbọ́ tọba wọn fẹ́ gbọ́ mi dára tó ìfẹ́ máa rí ọ̀hún rẹ́ra MFM and TV oníkọ́ ọ̀nà tọba ti débẹ̀ gbogbo ní kíbi lórí social media wà bá wọn pàdé gbó májè tán májè kébi kú bí ọ̀tún àgbáyé o èmi ni ó ṣe ìdí mo sọ yìí òní ọgbọ́n MFM and TV iléeṣẹ́ tó àbá àdéjẹ́ àgbà ló kọ̀ mí o sálámù aláìkùm.
You are listening to the #1 radio station, KAREEM FM, the station that is projecting the truth.
Alright, so you're welcome back to the last segment of the program this morning, which is the details to the story.
Still reading from the Guardian newspaper. New minimum wage Ondo Nasarawa ensures workers for payment. The Ondo State government on Tuesday expressed its readiness to pay 70,000 naira national minimum wage to state civil servants. The state head of service, Mr. Bayo Philip, stated this while speaking in his office in Akure, the state capital. The minimum wage was approved by President Bola Tinubu last month after a series of negotiations with the organized labor union in the country. According to him, the governor, Lucky Ayedatiwa, had repeatedly assured all that his administration would not do anything less than whether is approved by the federal government as national minimum wage for workers.
The next story this morning from the Vanguard newspaper says Sokoto CI said to conduct local government polls, and here's the detail. As waves of local government elections cut across many states of the Federation, ahead of possible takeoff of local government autonomy, Sokoto State Independent Electoral Commission says it's set to conduct local government elections in September this year. The chairman of the commission, Alhaji Aliyu Suleiman, disclosed this to journalists on Tuesday at the commission secretariat along Western Bypass, Sokoto. He said already the commission has held a meeting with
Jungle.
He said already the commission has held a meeting with leadership of 18 political parties and other stakeholders in the state with regards to the election and issued to them timetable and guidelines for their perusals. According to the commission chairman, about 10 political parties are participating in the election, adding that the concerned parties have already started forwarding names of their candidates standing for election, scheduled to hold on 24th of September 2024.
Now I'm reading from Nation newspaper. Police issues fresh warnings to river protesters. The Rivers Police Command on Wednesday morning warned that the original organizers of the ongoing hardship protest in the state have lost control of the crowd. A statement by River Police Public Relations Officer PPRO SP Grace Irene Koko has said hoodlums had hijacked the protest, resulting in criminal activities. The police said so-called protesters were harassing other residents going going about their lawful business activities. The state said the protesters were disrupting the traffic flow, forcing pass-buyers to attach leave left by their vehicles, erecting canopies in the main road, destroying billboards, threatening traders to cease operation, and setting trade ablaze. Tires ablaze on the roads.
Alright, so still reading from the Vanguard newspaper for this morning. Import duty wave on rise, orders begin next week, says federal government, and here's the details. The guidelines for the suspension of custom duty and taxes on imported food items are to commence next week, the federal government announced on Tuesday. In July, the federal government approved a 150-day duty-free window to allow the importation of maize, brown rice, and wheat as part of measures to combat rising food inflation across the country. The initiative was based on the implementation of the Presidential Accelerated and Stabilization Advancement Plan. Speaking at a meeting of heads of security agencies in Abuja on Tuesday, the Controller General of Customs, Bashir Adeniyi, said the implementation of the policy would commence once the guidelines are ready. He also explained that the delay experienced in the implementation of the policy was to ensure that the interests of all stakeholders, including farmers, were considered. Adeniyi stated that since the protests were anchored on ending hunger, the government had been taking effort to eradicate the hunger in the country. Alright, so the story says import duty wave on rise, orders begins next week, says federal government, and the story is on the Vanguard newspaper for this morning.
I'm still reading from Nation newspaper for this morning. Edom 4.3 million Nigerians gets direct cash transfer. No fewer than 4.3 million Nigerians have received direct cash transfer from the federal government. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, said yesterday. He said 1 million citizens were reached to the last few weeks, while the target is to transfer cash to 1 million vulnerable Nigerians each month. The minister spoke on a business program of a national television, during which he outlined the federal government's comprehensive plan to address the current economic challenges. He said the government was expanding its cash transfer program to support the poorest and most vulnerable. The program, he said, had reached 4.3 million people, which plans to increase this number rapidly.
Alright, so still reading from the Vanguard newspaper, reps feel to effect 50% pay cut blames Biru Kese, and here's the details of the story. The members of the House of Representatives have yet to implement their resolution to slash their salaries by 50% for the next 6 months. The federal lawmakers made a resolution on July 18, and it was expected to reflect in their salaries for the month of July, but the spokesman for the House of Representatives, Rotimi Akin, blamed bureaucracy for the delayed implementation. The lawmakers had made a promise while deliberating on a motion seeking to forestall the nationwide hunger protest, which began on August 1. At the plenary presided over by the Speaker, Tajuddin Abbas, the Deputy Speaker, Benjamin Kanu, amended the motion's prayer by pleading with his colleagues to sacrifice 50% of their salaries to support the government's intervention effort to address the situation. However, when contacted by the newsman, the House spokesperson, Akin, admitted that the lawmakers collected their salary in full.
Still reading from the Nation newspaper for this morning. Cost of living protests fizzle out in more states, Abuja. Normalcy returns to more states yesterday as the protest against the rising cost of living dissipated, with protesters in Akwa Ibom, Osun, and Ondo states backing down. Virtually all 17 states in the South Africa, except Rivers, have abandoned the protest. Abuja and Federal Capital Territory, FCT, also had a breather yesterday, life returning to normal in most parts. Lagos, the nation commercial city, returning to its boisterous self after protesters abandoned the Ganifiwine Freedom Park following President Bola Ahmed Tinubu broadcast on Saturday. In states such as Oyo, Ogun, and Delta, the protest was not noticeable yesterday.
Alright, so with that, we've come to the end of the news on from the newspapers, from live from MFM Radio and TV, right in the beautiful city of Ibadan. My name is MOBOLAJI KAREEM.
I am Koisola Kayode.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the program this morning. We really do appreciate. I say a very good morning to you once again and have a wonderful day ahead.
Audio Jungle.